The year is 1942. While the German war machine advances toward Moscow and Leningrad, another kind of warfare unfolds in the shadows of the Soviet Union. It is a war against its own people, conducted not with tanks and artillery, but with midnight arrests, show trials, and cattle cars bound for the frozen wilderness. You could be anyone: a factory worker who complained about bread rations, a teacher who questioned party doctrine, a soldier who retreated without permission, or simply someone whose neighbor needed to deflect suspicion from themselves. In Stalin's Soviet Union, the line between loyalty and treason shifts like sand in the wind. The knock comes at 3 a.m. 3 men in long coats stand at your door, their breath visible in the cold air. They don't need to show identification, everyone knows who they are. You're given 10 minutes to pack essentials, though you don't yet understand that where you're going, personal possessions are meaningless luxuries. Your family watches in terror as you're led away. Your children don't understand why Papa or Mama won't be coming home. Your spouse begins the transformation into a widow or widower of the state, someone whose very existence becomes a reminder of political unreliability. They too will face suspicion, job loss, and social isolation. The local prison is just the first stop. Here, in overcrowded cells that reek of fear and human waste, you wait for weeks or months. The interrogations begin, sessions that can last 18 hours, where sleep deprivation and psychological pressure extract confessions to crimes you never committed. The goal isn't truth, it's compliance. The cattle car becomes your world for what feels like eternity. 40 people crammed into a space meant for livestock, with a single bucket for sanitation and another for water that's refilled at random intervals. The train stops frequently, sometimes for hours, in the middle of nowhere. You learn to sleep standing up, pressed against strangers who become your temporary family. Death visits the car regularly. The elderly succumb to heart failure, the sick to pneumonia, infants to dehydration. Bodies are removed at stops and buried in unmarked graves beside the railway tracks. The guards record the deaths with bureaucratic efficiency, adjusting their paperwork as if subtracting inventory. Through the small barred window, you watch European Russia give way to the Urals, then to the endless expanse of Siberia. The landscape becomes increasingly desolate: frozen rivers, endless forests, and eventually tundra that stretches to the horizon like a white ocean. This is where the state sends people to disappear. Fellow prisoners share their stories in whispered conversations. There's Maria, a nurse accused of sabotage when patients died from lack of medicine. Ivan, a collective farm manager who couldn't meet impossible grain quotas. Alexei, a university professor who taught that Western literature had merit. Each story reveals the arbitrary nature of your shared fate. Some prisoners break mentally during the journey. They begin talking to invisible relatives or screaming at imaginary accusers. Others retreat into complete silence, their eyes becoming empty windows. You realize that survival requires a careful balance: maintain your humanity while protecting your sanity. The train's rhythm becomes hypnotic: the clacking of wheels, the swaying of the car, the collective breathing of 40 frightened souls. This mechanical heartbeat will haunt your dreams for decades, assuming you live long enough to dream again. Your destination emerges from the wilderness like a medieval fortress. Watchtowers rise above double-ringed barbed wire fences, their machine gun nests clearly visible. Guard dogs patrol the perimeter, their barking carrying across the frozen ground. This is Corrective Labor Camp 47, one of hundreds scattered across the Soviet Union's vast territory. Processing begins immediately. Your head is shaved, your clothes burned, your body searched for hidden valuables that might buy extra bread or protection. You're photographed from multiple angles, fingerprinted, and assigned a number that will replace your name for the duration of your sentence. The bureaucracy of dehumanization is thorough and efficient. The camp commandant, a career officer whose own survival depends on meeting production quotas, explains the rules with mechanical precision. Work norms must be met to receive full food rations. Failure to meet quotas results in punishment rations, barely enough to sustain life. Escape attempts are punishable by death, and the guards receive bonuses for each escapee they kill. Your barack assignment depends on your crime classification and work assignment. Political prisoners, considered the most dangerous, are often separated from common criminals. The building itself is a monument to functional misery: wooden walls that barely block the wind, windows without glass, a single stove that provides inadequate heat for 200 men. The bunk you're assigned becomes your entire personal space, a wooden shelf 6 feet long and 2 feet wide. Here you'll sleep, store your few possessions, and retreat when the psychological pressure becomes unbearable. The prisoner above you may die in his sleep and remain unnoticed for days in the overcrowded chaos. Sanitation is primitive and dangerous. Latrines are outdoor structures that become death traps in winter storms. Bathing occurs once a month in communal facilities with freezing water. Lice and other parasites spread diseases that the camp's minimal medical facilities cannot treat effectively. Dawn at 5 a.m., announced by the harsh clang of metal on metal. Roll call in the camp yard, regardless of weather conditions. Temperatures of -30 degrees Celsius are considered normal working conditions. Only at -40 does outdoor work cease, and then only officially. Guards often ignore thermometers that might interfere with production quotas. Your work brigade becomes your lifeline and potential death sentence. Tree felling in the taiga forests, mining coal or gold in underground shafts, constructing railways across permafrost, each assignment demands more calories than your rations provide. The mathematics of starvation are simple: input minus output equals death, just a matter of time. The brigade leader, usually a long-term prisoner who has learned the system's cruel logic, must balance keeping his team alive with meeting impossible quotas. He knows that solidarity can mean collective punishment, but also that individual survival often requires group cooperation. These moral calculations occur dozens of times each day. Food becomes an obsession that dominates every thought. A bowl of thin soup, a chunk of black bread, occasionally some fish or grain porridge, never enough to restore the energy expended in 12 hours of hard labor. Prisoners develop elaborate rituals around eating, savoring each spoonful while simultaneously calculating how to stretch rations until the next meal. The camp's internal economy operates on principles unknown to any textbook. Bread becomes currency, tobacco transforms into medicine, and information about guard rotations or upcoming transports trades for favors that might mean survival. Those with useful skills, doctors, mechanics, carpenters, enjoy slightly better treatment and become power brokers in this desperate marketplace. Disease spreads through the camp like wildfire through dry wood. Scurvy, from lack of vitamins, makes teeth fall out and wounds refuse to heal. Dysentery kills through dehydration and malnutrition. Tuberculosis claims the weakened lungs of those who should have decades left to live. The camp hospital, staffed by prisoner doctors with minimal supplies, becomes a holding area for the dying. Winter tests every aspect of human endurance. Clothing consists of a thin jacket, worn boots, and whatever additional layers you can improvise from scraps of fabric or newspaper. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, and noses with casual efficiency. Working with metal tools in extreme cold becomes a form of torture. Skin freezes instantly to metal surfaces, leaving flesh behind when you try to pull away. Yet even in this hell, human creativity and dignity find ways to manifest. Prisoners carve chess sets from wood scraps and play by candlelight. Musicians create instruments from tin cans and wire, composing songs that capture their experience. Artists draw portraits on birch bark, creating beauty in a place designed to eliminate it. Months dissolve into years, and the outside world begins to feel like a dream you once had. News of the war reaches you in fragments, victories and defeats filtered through camp rumors and new prisoner arrivals. The siege of Leningrad, the battle for Stalingrad, the German retreat, these momentous events feel distant and abstract compared to the immediate struggle for your next meal. Letters from home arrive months late and heavily censored. Black ink obscures entire paragraphs, leaving you to reconstruct your family's news from fragments and implications. Your children's drawings, when they reach you, become treasures more valuable than bread. But increasingly, letters stop coming. Families move, change their names, or simply give up hope that you still exist. The camp creates its own social hierarchy more complex than any outside society. Political prisoners, despite their dangerous classification, often command respect for their education and principles. Common criminals may enjoy better treatment from guards but face constant suspicion from other inmates. Religious believers find ways to maintain their faith in secret. Orthodox Christians carve tiny crosses from wood chips, Muslims pray facing Mecca when they can determine the direction, Jews observe holidays through shared remembrance. These acts of faith become forms of resistance against a system that seeks to control not just bodies, but souls. Mental breakdown becomes a daily threat that requires constant vigilance. Some prisoners intentionally injure themselves to avoid work details, trading immediate pain for temporary relief. Others retreat into complete catatonia, their minds shutting down to protect whatever remains of their sanity. Hope becomes a dangerous emotion that must be carefully rationed, too much leads to crushing disappointment, too little leads to despair and death. Survivors learn to maintain just enough optimism to keep fighting while protecting themselves from the soul-destroying cycle of expectation and betrayal. Victory Day, May 9, 1945. The war is over, but for Gulag prisoners, the celebration feels hollow. Some sentences are reduced as part of general amnesty, others extended without explanation. The logic that governed your arrest continues to govern your potential release. Those fortunate enough to receive release papers face an immediate problem. How do you return to a world that has spent years learning to function without you? The skills that kept you alive in the camp, suspicion, hoarding, emotional detachment, become liabilities in normal society. The train journey home reverses your original passage but carries different burdens. Instead of fear of the unknown, you now carry fear of the known. What if your family has moved, remarried, or simply decided you're dead? Arriving home brings cruel revelations. Your apartment reassigned, your job filled, your children taught that you were a traitor. The state provides no support for reintegration, no counseling, no job assistance, no acknowledgement that an injustice occurred. Former prisoners learn to hide their experiences, inventing cover stories while creating underground networks to help others navigate the hostile landscape of post-release life. The psychological scars prove more persistent than physical wounds. Nightmares about camp life continue for decades. Simple pleasures trigger overwhelming emotions, relationships become difficult when you've learned to trust no one completely, and the hypervigilance that kept you alive becomes a burden in civilian life. Yet some find purpose in preserving their experiences through hidden testimonies and quiet acts of remembrance, ensuring that the voices of those who didn't survive are not forgotten in the machinery of historical amnesia. Years pass before the full scope of the Gulag system becomes publicly acknowledged. Official records, when they're finally opened, reveal the systematic nature of the terror. Over 18 million people passed through the camps, with millions dying from execution, starvation, disease, and exposure. The camps themselves slowly empty and decay, with nature reclaiming the watchtowers and barracks that once housed such misery. Memorial sites arise slowly, often through the efforts of former prisoners and their families, preserving artifacts and testimonies that warn future generations about the price of unchecked political power. Modern visitors to former camp sites often comment on the natural beauty of these locations: pristine forests, clear rivers, mountain vistas that suggest peace rather than suffering. This contrast serves as a reminder that evil is not inherent in places or systems, but in the choices people make about how to treat one another. The children and grandchildren of survivors carry both inherited trauma and examples of courage, creativity, and compassion that flourished even in humanity's darkest corners. The Gulag experience stands as both a historical tragedy and a testament to human endurance. In a system designed to break the human spirit, that spirit found ways to survive, create, and maintain hope. Your story, like those of millions of others, becomes part of humanity's ongoing conversation about justice, power, and dignity, proof that memory persists where systems of control intended silence, and that freedom and dignity exist as inherent human rights that must be constantly defended.